Instructor, and we will be talking about emotional or behavioral disorders. There are many difficulties defining what is good mental health or what is normal behavior. As you've probably studied in your other classes, there are so many theories about mental health, and there are differences between cultures and ethnic groups about what is, quote, normal, unquote, and what is, quote, abnormal, unquote. And sometimes these emotional disorders occur together with other learning problems, and that further clouds the issue. You know, in the past we used to call people emotionally disturbed or socially maladjusted. We might have called them emotionally handicapped. But now the proper language is behavioral disorder or emotional disorder. It's less stigmatizing than emotionally disturbed. So what is the definition using IDEA for emotional or behavioral disorders? Now, if you notice, I bolded this on the slide. It is going to be one or more of the following. And then if you would underline over a long period of time. And it has to be severe to a marked degree, and it has to adversely affect your ability to learn. So again, we have to rule out other things. The inability to learn is not related to other factors. One of the key features of these kinds of disorders is the inability to build or maintain relationships. Here's a person who has difficulty keeping a friend, knowing social skills, even things like shaking somebody's hand, using eye contact, perhaps communication issues. These are people that may be unhappy or depressed, or maybe even fearful. There are many types of mental health concerns that go under the umbrella of serious emotional disturbance. And I would like you to look at those in your book. This even includes disabilities like schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder, phobias, and so on. The definition does not apply to children who are socially maladjusted. In other words, a child who may not fit in with the crowd. So again, the conditions that need to be satisfied for the IDEA law are those that it is a chronic, ongoing emotional or behavioral disorder. It is very, very severe, and it is causing difficulties in learning. Let's take a look at some of the problems with the IDEA definition. First of all, it's vague and it's subjective. What is a satisfactory relationship? What does that look like? Certainly we could argue about that. What does inappropriate behavior look like? Again, you know, what is appropriate in one eye certainly might not be appropriate in another. It's going to depend on your background, the culture, your age, all kinds of things. And here's another big problem, folks. This definition, as written, excludes children on the basis for which they're included. In other words, how do you know if a person, if they're just socially maladjusted, they don't fit in the crowd, they maybe wear odd clothing, you know, they want to stick out, they want to, or they don't socialize. Is that a mental health concern, or is this a true emotional disturbance? Well, maybe there's a mix there. Also, the individual teacher's expectations and tolerance makes a huge difference. Maybe you've been in a classroom where a teacher encourages you to get up, move around, and tolerates a lot of boisterous and loud activity in a busy classroom. And you have a child that's labeled creative and energetic. And the next year they're in a different classroom. They have the same behavior, a different teacher, and they're labeling the child as being unruly, you know, behaviorally disordered, and, you know, having attention problems. It's the same child, but looking through different eyes. So identification is extremely difficult and subjective. The Council for Children with Behavioral Disorders wanted to define this definition even more. And what they wanted to emphasize is that this is a response so different from what's appropriate at your given age, what's appropriate culturally and in your ethnic norms, and the fact that it affects your educational performance. So I've underlined some words there for you. This is not just a temporary response to a stress, something that, if your folks are going through a divorce and your grades drop for 6 weeks or even a semester, that would be probably expected. We're talking something longer, more persistent and more severe. Also, it's exhibited in more than one setting. So not just at school, but you're having trouble, say, at in the community, at the supermarket, you're having trouble at home, difficulty relating to the school crossing guard, things like that, where you're just having this behavior everywhere. And you're not doing very well in the regular classroom. You are not responding to instruction there with the rest of the students. You seem to need something more. You're having trouble learning. Let's look at the common characteristics of a student that may have an emotional and behavioral disorder. Two primary behavioral excesses, and I'd like you to know both. Number one, externalizing behaviors. So these are things we can see outside, and that is the most common behavior pattern. Non-compliance is the kingpin. It's the number one problem. Like if you're told to line up, you say, no, I'm not going to. You don't want to obey any rules. You throw a temper tantrum. Now, you think of a young kid like the picture there, but I mean, think about a violent outburst, a teenager having a violent outburst, property destruction, threats of violence or violence, property damage, running away, those kinds of things. You could have internalizing behaviors. Those are things we may not see that happen inside, where someone might be extremely withdrawn, they're daydreaming, they're in their own fantasy world, maybe they are extremely fearful, anxious. Perhaps they have a lot of somatic complaints like stomach aches and headaches, and all of their emotional problems are coming out in physical symptoms. Here's someone who easily blows up and they're difficult to calm down. These things are less disturbing to the teacher, and so they may not be identified. Generally, these issues remain relatively stable, and they do correlate with dropout, delinquency, substance abuse, and dying young. Again, as I mentioned, there are many types of emotional or behavioral disorders. I've listed a few examples here on your slide. I would like you to refer to your book for the descriptions, but look at that list. It's a big list, anywhere from bipolar disorder to eating problems to post-traumatic stress, obsessive compulsive disorders, and so forth. Here are some common characteristics, if we could make a few generalizations. You might see a student who has very low academic achievement. That doesn't mean that they're not bright, but they are 1 to 2 years below their grade level. They are absent much of the time. This is the highest absentee rate of any group. They are at risk for dropping out. 60% drop out. They may have other disabilities like learning disabilities or communication disabilities. Reading problems are very common. Very few get a high school diploma. We see a lot of problems with social skills. Again, that's a key factor. Lower levels of empathy, caring for other people, lower involvement in extracurricular activities, less frequent contact with peers, and the peer relationships are of negative quality. If you look at that, there's a lot of juvenile delinquency. They are 13 times more likely to be arrested, and more than half are repeat offenders. What is the prevalence of this kind of concern? Well, it's very, very difficult to measure. So we have wide variety of estimates, between 3 and 6% of children. What we think is, given the prevalence, that not many students are getting the special services that they need. About 3/4 of the individuals in this category are boys. So what causes, emotional or behavioral concerns? Well, that's of course a huge question. There's no one answer. We know that there are biological factors. It could possibly be something to do with abnormal brain development, maybe in utero. Maybe there was disease or trauma. Perhaps it's a genetic factor. It may, actually, some of these things may have genetic links, such as depression. Maybe it's the temperament of the child. If this is an easy or difficult temperament, maybe it was a reaction to stress in early upbringing. So there's many things that could be happening here. Most children do not show any kind of brain trauma. Of course, we need to look at the environment as well. I mean, is this child coming from a home where there's inconsistent parenting? Was there social rejection by peers? Harsh punishment by the parent or guardian? Was it a parent who was neglectful and did not monitor their children, or did not show very much love or affection? If you look there in school, it says low ASR. ASR means active student response. So the student is not feeling motivated to participate in school. Maybe they've learned some maladaptive ways of getting control, that they would wear people down through, constant pushing, and then they get what they want. That's coercive pain control. Could you please look at your textbook for more information there? Also, maybe it's your environment in the community that you live in. Maybe you have low SES or socioeconomic status, so poverty might be a factor here. Are you getting reinforced by your gang that you're in, perhaps, for dysfunctional behavior, participating in criminal actions, and so forth? Actually, I have to say, overall, there is no single one cause for behavioral emotional disorders. It's a complicated picture, and these are just some of the variables that we can look at. How do we help? Now again, here we're going to look at education. We've got to give that direct, explicit instruction. Remember, breaking things down into smaller tasks, giving that reinforcement, encouraging them with positive reinforcement to get higher active student response. That praise is so important. And actually, one of the most important things that we're going to work on here in the IEP is social skills. We are going to actually have to teach how to cooperate with others, how to negotiate when we get into a conflict. How do we actually communicate with somebody else? How do you accept a compliment? How do you start a conversation? How do we respond when we're angry? What is an appropriate way? What about when we're under stress? How do we actually problem solve? Remember, all of these things relate to working together with other people. And in life that you're not going to go to a job and work by yourself. Most likely you're going to be with a team of coworkers. So these are life skills that are absolutely necessary for success. We want to support positive behavior. These are kids that are always caught when they're doing bad. So how do we actually help them be more positive and show pro-social behavior? We have to give them rewards and reinforce the positives. We also have to give consequences and rules for violations. So it's going to be a pretty much a behavioral plan that we would put together. We would need expectations from the school, from the environment we're in, and then the classroom expectations. And we also have these external rules, but we want to have that student start to self-manage and understand their own behavior. What are their triggers? What are the difficult things, and then to monitor those, and then how do we actually work through those difficult times? What kind of strategies can we practice? Sometimes our peers can give us tremendous support in modeling and reinforcing positive behaviors. Here's just a little example of a self-management report card, just to say like how you would rate yourself. How am I doing on the first hour, and then what kind of points can I earn, because then with those points I can get a positive reward. What kinds of opportunities are there for placement? What's the best place to educate somebody? Well, that's going to certainly depend on the individual. About 40% or so of students get their education in a separate classroom, a special school, or a residential facility. Most of them, because of their serious nature, require more intensive intervention. Students really need to be evaluated on what they need and look at that full range of services that are available. So it really just depends on the individual. I think it's very important for teachers or people that are working with individuals that have these concerns, is to really see that individual, try to help them work through their frustration and conflicts, to help them learn and relate to others better. Sometimes they have a negative response to you, they might call names and so forth, but the teacher or the therapist or the caseworker is the role model. It's the mature individual that's in control. You might say, I don't like, I like you, but I don't care for that behavior. That behavior is not acceptable. And so we have to differentiate on how we reinforce behavior. I'd like you to look at your textbook about current issues and future trends. One of the things that we really need to look at here is the IDEA law. We need to serve everybody with emotional behavioral disorders, and many are not getting the help that they need based on the definition. And then we need to start earlier. Let's try to detect the problem right away, and let's try to help them. And then also let's prevent. Let's try to work on the community to be proactive, not wait till the child is older and the problems get worse. We probably need to work on wraparound services for families, social services, mental health, and juvenile justice, and putting these practices in place to help students be successful.